Hi everyone! Welcome back, or welcome if you are new here. I am Emma, and this is my YouTube channel. This is not my typical setup. I actually don't have a typical setup yet, but we're just trying to figure things out. But today, I'm really excited because I am going to be talking to you guys about Bachelors Grove Cemetery, the history behind it, and sharing with you some of my personal experiences. And if I can fit it in, I will try to fit in some footage that I've taken from my experiences at Bachelors Grove Cemetery. So, without any further ado, let's get right into the video because there is a whole lot to unpack and a whole lot to get into. So, let's get into it. So, that was fun. I just filmed pretty much everything I'm about to reread to you guys, and my camera stopped recording in the middle of it. So, there's that. But without further ado, let's get into the history of Bachelors Grove Cemetery in Midlothian, Illinois. The settlement at Bachelors Grove began as early as the late 1820s, with larger numbers of immigrants arriving in the 1830s and 1840s. The initial settlers were generally American Yankees of English, Irish, and Scottish descent, most of whom came here from New York, Vermont, and Connecticut. The second wave of settlers arriving from Europe, primarily of Germanic origin, began in the late 1840s and was predominantly the nationality of immigrants settling in this area for the next 50 years or so. The cemetery is one of the oldest cemeteries in South Cook County. It is located in Bremen Township, Cook County, Illinois, on 143rd Street, 3/10 of a mile east of Ridgeland Avenue, and it is down a trail that was the former alignment of the Midlothian Turnpike that has since been closed to vehicular traffic since the 1960s. Now, I actually don't think that is correct. I mean, maybe it was, but I think that has been lifted because the Turnpike, Bachelors Grove, and the park across the street from Bachelors Grove are all. Okay, awesome. It stopped recording again. As I was saying, the Turnpike, Bachelors Grove itself, and the park across the street from Bachelors Grove are all open to public access. So I don't know if that was once a thing that's changed, but you can get there. And I would also like to add in something about the Turnpike. The Turnpike right next to Bachelors Grove is, I'll try to insert a picture if I can find one, but it's essentially a gated off section of the turnpike that is hovering right above a swamp, or creek, but it's really more swamp-ish if you kind of look at it. And it is said that Al Capone, one of Chicago's most famous, Al Capone, one of Chicago's most famous gangsters, actually would dump his victims' bodies over the turnpike and into that swamp. And I feel a lot of energy from that swamp. I don't actually get a whole lot of haunted energy from the cemetery itself, but more so about the surrounding area, and especially because of what's occurred there since the land was kind of abandoned. But we'll get to that. Okay, so legend has it that the cemetery got its name because only men were buried here, but it actually came from the name of a family who settled in the area. Bachelors Grove Cemetery was established no later than November 1844 with the burial of Mrs. Eliza Scott, though some sources allude to burials having taken place on the grounds as early as 1836. The last two burials to date were Miss Laura M. McGee in 1965 and the cremated remains of Robert E. Shields in 1989. The last independent cemetery trustee was Clarence Fulton of Tinley Park, whose family were early settlers of the Bremen Township, and many of whom were buried in the cemetery. Prior to World War II, the cemetery was a typical small township cemetery. In the days where picnicking in cemeteries was fashionable, family members would picnic on the grounds. Some would fish or swim in the former rock quarry located to the northwest of the cemetery, which is the swamp. After World War II, however, things changed, and not for the better. Many family members of those buried in the cemetery moved out of the area and no longer visited, which is really sad. When the Midlothian Turnpike was realigned onto 143rd Street, the former routing became a lover's lane and a place frequented by teenagers drinking underage and otherwise misbehaving. The trustees of the cemetery tried to get a new entrance onto 143rd Street in the 1960s after the old alignment of the Midlothian Turnpike was closed to vehicular traffic. However, they were unable to gain the required easement, from the Cook County Forest Preserve District. It is also at this time that reports of paranormal activity surrounding the cemetery and nearby the Midlothian Turnpike area truly began to spike, peaking in the 1970s and 1980s. This combination of an isolated rural location not routinely patrolled by the sheriff's police and with a reputation as a haunted area drew in many people whose interests were demonstrably not in the interest of the cemetery. The vandalism of the graves became almost routine. Almost all of the headstones were vandalized and broken. Some headstones were partially or entirely thrown into the nearby flooded quarry. Others were removed from the property, some being recovered by police departments as far away as Maywood, Evergreen Park, and Chicago. Evidence of the performance of satanic rituals has been found in the cemetery, along with evidence of attempts to open and rob graves. I can attest to this. It's heartbreaking. There is, I think, a couple of tombstones that are left intact, and one of them belongs to an infant girl and her father. But I mean, it's almost unrecognizable as a cemetery. Like, it's pretty insane. This undesirable conduct was not performed by, caused directly by, or condoned by legitimate paranormal researchers. However, the same rumors and reports that attracted legitimate paranormal researchers also attracted those whose behavior was not up to any common standards of decency. Just beyond the rear barrier of the cemetery is a small, stagnant pond. This pond, while outside of the graveyard, is still not untouched by the horror connected to the place. One night in the late 1970s, 2 Cook County Forest Preserve officers were on late-night patrol near here and claimed to see the apparition of a horse emerge from the waters of the pond. The animal appeared to be pulling a plow behind it that was steered by the ghost of an old man. The vision crossed the road in front of the ranger's vehicle, was framed for a moment in the glare of their headlights, and then vanished into the forest. The men simply stared in shock for a moment, and then looked at one another to be sure that they had both seen the same thing. They later reported the incident, and since that time have not been the last to see the old man and that horse. Little did the rangers know, but this apparition was actually a part of an old legend connected to the pond. It seems that in the 1870s, a farmer was plowing a nearby field when something startled his horse. The farmer was caught by surprise and became tangled in the reins when he was dragged in behind the horse as it plunged into the small pond. Unable to free himself, he was pulled down into the murky water by the weight of the horse and the plow, and he drowned. Clarence Fulton approached Bremen Township as early as 1967, sought to take over the management and care of the cemetery, but he was turned down. While there was a cemetery association, it was never formally incorporated, and all of its assets beyond the cemetery itself had long since spent coping with the highly destructive vandalism the cemetery suffered. The cemetery was finally taken over by Cook County after being approached by Fulton in 1975. I apologize for the background noise. My bunny is doing her zoomies for the night. Try and ignore. I apologize. It was discovered at that time that the plot sales had not been directly documented with the county, and that the title to the land still rested in the hands of the descendants of Edward M. Everden. Cook County obtained clear title to the cemetery by condemnation. The cemetery is now under the supervision and responsibility of the cemetery trustees under the Real Estate Management Office of the Cook County Board. Through intergovernmental agreements, responsibility for the maintenance is shared with the Cook County Forest Preserve District, whose land surrounds the entire cemetery. Several groups have, over the more recent years, donated labor to maintaining Bachelors Grove Cemetery. However, beyond keeping the property somewhat less overgrown, they haven't been able to accomplish much. Between the difficulty in navigating the bureaucracy of the Cook County government and conflicts with each other as to what the cemetery should be used for and the degree of public access that should be allowed, no headstone maintenance or other work beyond brush and trash removal has been accomplished by anyone. So that's really all this article has to say, and I think that it touched on a lot of the really important things that I was hoping to touch on, like the turnpike. I'm actually going to use this for a light, like the turnpike and the pond, and it touched on something that I personally had even forgotten about, the ghost horse and the ghost man being pulled by the ghost horse. There was a friend of mine a while back when we went to Bachelors Grove Cemetery, and this is a sighting that has been claimed to be seen by many people who have visited, usually at night and usually intoxicated. So I was neither of those things and haven't been any of the times that I've visited Bachelors Grove, so I have been, I suppose you could say, fortunate enough to not experience this. However, I think it would be a little neat to see it. But there are reports of a ghost house at Bachelors Grove Cemetery, and essentially it's this big mansion-esque house in the middle of the woods, and it's usually, like I said, dark, and you are usually intoxicated when you see this house, and there are lights on. It looks very inviting, it looks very welcoming, and you start to walk towards the house, leading you into the woods, and the closer you get to the house, the farther away the house becomes until you reach the spot where the house should have been, and there's nothing there, and you're in the middle of the woods at night. There are definitely some strong entities at play at Bachelors Grove. There's no denying that. My skepticism is about whether or not that activity is sourced from the cemetery itself or from the surrounding area. And my personal belief is that it's from the surrounding area. Doing my investigations there, I don't feel any sense of unease or unrest or anything of the sort, really. I feel as though it's almost quiet, for lack of a better term, until you enter the woods, until you exit that back gate and into the swamp area. I mean, it is not only something that I caught on a spirit box, but a physical change in energy that you can feel. The energy shifts from that of beings who are resting in peace and you paying your respects to restless spirits, angry spirits, distraught, tormented, haunted spirits. And I firmly believe that it's due to the fact that, like I said, Al Capone is said to have dumped bodies there. But it also sounds like there was a lot of other activity that happened there as well. I mean, the man with the horse. Would you like to come say hi? I guess not. She's just being nosy. But there, along with the man and the horse on the carriage, I have heard stories of a psychic medium who went to Bachelors Grove. I think this was in the 80s. I don't quote me on this, but a psychic medium went to Bachelors Grove in hopes of doing a paranormal investigation and was upon, and this is not verbatim, I'm retelling stories here. Upon entering the area of the swamp, apparently this psychic medium sort of entered a trance and walked knee deep into the swamp. And stop biting me. Stop biting me. Don't bite me. Don't do that. And bent over and picked something up out of the water, and it was a coin. It was a silver coin. And apparently, up until that point, there had been sightings of a young boy crying, claiming he lost his coin. And after that event, there were no more sightings of that young boy. And I just think that's so fascinating, because that is why I enjoy doing this kind of stuff, is because there are spirits out there who are lost or who died suddenly and confusingly and don't understand what happened to them. And I can only imagine the gratification that a feeling of knowing that you helped something otherworldly figure out, get some closure, really get some closure is what I'm getting to. Helping another being, whether it is a physical or a metaphysical being, get closure is something that I am truly, truly passionate about. And just the thought that there are so many tormented spirits at Bachelors Grove. I'm going to try and insert bits and pieces of the spirit box sessions. The videos were very long, and this video is already very long, but yeah, there you can really hear the you can hear it. You can feel it. It's a very, very highly active location, just not really in the sense that you'd think it would be.
It's him? Who is he? Somebody? So, let's start. I hear you. To the woman who is crying, what is your name? Are you in pain? I heard hold on. Can anybody here tell me about the ghost house? Does anybody know about the ghost house? Or would you like to talk about some of the satanic rituals that take place here? Because I'm sure those are quite disturbing. If you are not of light and love, you are not welcome to use this device to speak to me. I heard go and stay, but two different voices. That deep man voice seems angry. I feel a very angry spirit trying to communicate with me. And I also hear a woman in pain or frightened. I heard there were maybe three of us. That exact sentence. bodies. Who is in pain? Do you want help? All right, if you don't want help, then I will not help you, and I will end this conversation now. Thank you for speaking to me, and you are not welcome to communicate with me any further after I end this. Goodbye.
So we're gonna wrap it up here. With that all being said, I really hope you guys enjoyed this video. I really enjoyed making this video. It was really fun to talk to you guys about my personal experiences and those of others, and even share with you a little bit of what I got to experience at Bachelors Grove Cemetery. I would really appreciate it if you guys could leave me a like or a comment letting me know if you like this kind of stuff so that I can keep making more videos like this. And if you absolutely hated it, let me know that too so that I never make another one of these again. But with that being said, do all things in love and light, and until next time, love, Emma.